is that they are designed in collaboration with industries, so using information from individual animal owners as well as producers and stakeholder groups. Information is collected on specific topics. The beauty of this particular type of study is it is supposed to be very statistically sound. So we're working in coordination with the National Agricultural Statistics Service to gather these data. It's voluntary information, so it's nothing that's coerced out of anybody, and it's highly confidential, which is the goal, is to hopefully, again, provide objective information that will give us a view of what the health and production status is of that animal. As you can see from this slide, these studies started in 1990, and there's a rotational basis depending on the species involved. And Dr. Josie Traub-Dargitz is on the call, and she's credited with the involvement of horses in about 1998. And again, the emphasis has been largely on food and fiber types of animals, and Dr. Traub-Dargitz did a nice job of articulating the fact that horses are an agricultural species and should therefore be included. And so on about a 10-year basis, study is done on a particular species, and you can see that horses are scheduled for 2026. So the process involves several steps, and the first would be our needs assessment, which I'll describe some of those data or share some of those data with you today. And then from the needs assessment, a study is designed, and that would involve things like questionnaires as well as biologic sampling. The data are collected between the National Agricultural Statistics Team, or NASS, and the veterinary services team, and then they're analyzed by the NOMS group and reported in a variety of different ways, and that includes published reports as well as presentations. The NOMS needs assessment phase, the goal of this is to determine what the information gaps are. And again, I'll go through this in a little bit more detail, but this allows us the opportunity to question both individuals as well as important stakeholder groups to determine at this time what the information gaps are, and then to relate it to some of the information that has been collected previously. The overall design, and I'm for some reason, every time I'm online, I seem to be having landscape work done on my, so I can't avoid the mower in the background. But in terms of the overall design, NASS helps with defining the study states. So selected states are determined, and then information from the needs assessment, as well as conversations with focus groups and looking at the previous studies, allows us to set those study objectives. And from those objectives, we will develop a series of questionnaires, determine which of the biologic samples we wish to catch, and train the data collectors. So just as an example, these are the states that were selected for the 2015 study, and there were 28 states that were collected by the NASS group. It was determined based on whether or not there were at least $1,000 of annual sales in some sort of an agricultural product, which would include, whether or not it's production of meat, hay, anything, any kind of an agricultural product. And for the purposes of the equine study, there had to be at least 5 horses or more on each property that was being evaluated. This particular point has been something that I have heard a lot of discussion about, and is a little bit of a sticking point with some people in terms of how representative this population is of the national population that we're attempting to study. And I will say that I have learned that that is something that is being discussed at the level of the USDA, and potentially at some point in the future that will be changed to include smaller operations with horses, 5 or less on a particular property. But I don't think that's going to happen for the study we're talking about. So just to give you an example of the 2015 study and the objectives that were determined, again, from the needs assessment as well as from focus groups. One of the major things that came out was to describe the trends in equine care and health, and that would be the trends between the studies in 1998, 2005, and 2015. That's important information for us to know in terms of how we're going to look at diseases, et cetera, over time. The cost of horse ownership was a point that was of interest to the group. Infectious disease always seems to float into the mix of this because that is a great concern to both horse owners as well as industry stakeholders. Lameness was an area of distinct interest in 2015, and then parasite control, including ticks. I think Dr. Traub-Dargits was really useful for the tick piece. Data are collected in 3 different phases, and the first phase is with a general questionnaire. So again, we've used the needs assessment information to set objectives, and from the objectives, a questionnaire is developed to focus on those objectives. These are generally lengthy questionnaires, and they're administered by our NAS group to the areas that we've identified across the states. Phase 2 then involves the veterinary medical officer team, the veterinary services team, to go back. Historically, they have gone back to those same premises if the people on those premises opt in to participate in this second phase, and this is where some targeted information about health and disease is obtained, and at the same time, biologic samples might be obtained. Again, as I mentioned, this information is then reported through a variety of different means, including publications, pamphlets, the website, presentations. So how are these results used? And probably many of you have looked at these studies in the past. I will say from my own personal experience as a researcher in equine research, these studies have been really important in terms of identifying incidents of disease, trends in disease, and sort of approaches to management. So from an educational point of view, the information can be very, very useful. It can also direct some of the efforts on both the state and the national level for how monies might be spent or application for further study on things that are impacting a particular species, such as the horse. So we'll talk a little bit specifically about the 2026 needs assessment study that we just recently finished and compiled. Again, this was a survey that was sent out online between August and October of 2023. It involved both individuals as well as stakeholder groups. And it focused on 4 primary areas of interest, and that was management issues, welfare and economics, health, and infectious disease. And some of these things certainly overlap. So if you look at the respondents, obviously the individual horse owner, when we're talking about our individual respondents, the horse owner was the primary population that was captured in these surveys, with trainers also being a pretty significant portion of the individual respondents. When we look at the leaders or the individual or the industry stakeholder groups, state and federal government certainly was highly represented in these groups. The American Horse Council, AAP, and others contributed information as well. So this is the meat of what we learned during this study. And when we looked at the topic of equine management, across both the individuals as well as our industry stakeholder groups, biosecurity was the top area of concern. And you'll see that the third area of concern for both groups was disease testing, cost, reasons, types. And so if we look at those 2 topics and then we see some of the information further down, a lot of that leads into infectious disease. So I think the top concern for the groups that were surveyed were the incidence of infectious disease outbreaks such as herpes virus. Now, individual priorities, the second highest was feed management and nutrition, whereas for the industry stakeholder group, it was equine identification, including microchips and traceability. There are several smaller topics at the bottom of the screen that are not depicted in this particular graph. We tried to clean it up a little bit just so it was easier to look at, but lots of other things were identified as important management issues, but not to the same degree as these particular topics. When we're looking at equine welfare and economics, I will say that I evaluated the write-in responses from these surveys, and equine welfare was the most prominent thing that was identified as a concern across both groups, but specifically for those individuals. And that welfare issue spans a lot of different topics. Unwanted horses and resources were definitely at the top of that. And unwanted horses really captures a lot of different animals. It's not just the neglected horse. It's end of life issues and how individuals that maybe can't afford a horse, how they're able to move that horse into a different phase, whether it's humane disposal or whether it's rehoming, those kinds of things. Of interest to me as an AAP person was the fact that the use and availability of veterinarians ranked very high also with both groups. And that is a topic that has been addressed with a great deal of energy at the AAP level because of sustainability in equine practice. So this was an area that was truly identified as a gap for horse owners and also as well as within the industry. The third topic was I'm having trouble seeing my statistics here. For the individual horse owner was the suitable and intended use of horses, and then emergency and disaster preparedness certainly came up because of the incidence of more and more emergencies that we're seeing. From a health point of view, a priority on the individual owner side, lameness still was a very high priority. Endocrine diseases ranked very high on both sides, as did neurologic diseases that would include EHM, EPM, wobblers. And then there was a little bit of a disparity between the two groups on respiratory disease, with the industry leaders feeling that respiratory disease was an area of great significance. When we look at particular specific infectious diseases, equine herpes virus was the primary of concern, and that makes a lot of sense. I mean, with the types of outbreaks that have been occurring across the country, particularly at events, and the publicity around that and the impact it has on the event as well as the individual owner, that just makes a lot of sense. So both groups also ranked mosquito-borne diseases very high. That includes West Nile virus and Triple E. Again, that makes a lot of sense, particularly with the changes in climate that have occurred and the longer lifespan of mosquitoes and the spread of mosquitoes and those diseases. The industry group felt that EPM was an area of great interest, where the individual horse owners thought that EPM was of great interest, where the industry group put a little bit more emphasis on the incidence of strangles. I think it's interesting to note that these trends do change over time. So in the 2015, equine paraplasmosis came up very high in the ranked infectious diseases. And I think because we're not seeing that disease, or it's not getting as much notoriety, that did not come up as high. I know Dr. Pelzel-McCloskey will talk about vesicular stomatitis. It's interesting to me that I think that probably has a geographic impact. So it may be why it did not come up as high on either group, because it certainly seems to impact a particular side of the country. So again, just to look at the areas of greatest interest, the overall areas of greatest interest were biosecurity practices. That was on the management side. Welfare issues represented 3 of the topics, and that included the use and availability of veterinarians, resources for unwanted horses and the distressed owner, as well as emergency preparedness and response. And then, of course, infectious disease and vector-borne disease was very high. So these topics do interweave without question in a lot of ways. And the next step will be, how we manage these things. I mentioned earlier that for the write-in responses, again, equine welfare was an area of great concern, infectious disease, the same topics, over and over again. What's interesting to read, particularly in the individual horse owner, some of the interest on the availability of usable land. There were some comments written in about the encroachment of urbanization into previously rural areas. I think that is something that horse owners are feeling like they are having a difficult time maintaining usable land or obtaining usable land. I was actually very interested to read that there, particularly from the horse owner, there was some interest in uniform medical record keeping. I know that's a topic that we discuss a lot at the AAP, how we can have some method of record keeping that is transferable between working groups and that will also identify things like vaccination status, and it would certainly be useful from an infectious disease point of view. You can see some of the other medical conditions that were identified of interest. So our next steps are to take these data and to work with some focus groups. We have spent some time with a group of people at the AAP and gathered some information and input on some of these data. We'll work with some others. We certainly will look to this group to provide us with some information or input about areas of importance and interest for the upcoming study. Once we hone down on those objectives, we will then go ahead and develop the questionnaires and determine the population that will be identified to fill out those questionnaires, and then the need and the means of biologic sampling. So this is where you come in with a plea. I'm not sure that we will have time to discuss this on this particular call. You see the email of Dr. Andrea Beam and myself here. We certainly would welcome input. I know that there are definitely some opinions across the group and individuals about the best population to survey and some of the questions that we should be asking in this survey. I encourage you to go to the NAHMS website and review some of the materials that are there. They're extensive. It's a great resource on a lot of different topics. So that is what I have for today, and I'll turn it back over to you, Dr. Flynn.
Thanks, Dr. McPherson. So in lieu of time, we may have time at the end to get to some questions. So if you can put your questions in the chat for now, and we'll try to address them as we go along later in the schedule. And if we do not get to them at this point in time today, I'm sure we can forward those on to the team and they can get the answers back to us. So at this time, I'm going to transition to Dr. White, who is going to give us an Equine Disease Communication Center update. Dr. White, you should be able to share. There you go. It's all yours.
Thank you. I appreciate having the time to give an update for the Equine Disease Communication Center. And I probably should start at the beginning of my talk. What are you seeing, Katie? Is that the program?
Yes, sir. You're good to go. I'm seeing your opening slide.
Thanks. So what's the current status? We have 3 of us that run this operation now. Leslie Barlow is the communication manager, and Dr. Emily Nitraziba in California as the assistant vet. We all service this operation 7 days a week and share some of the approval between Emily and I. We have an advisory committee of 21 members. They represent the industry, wide areas of the industry. Our annual budget for personnel is $105,000 approximately. That doesn't include everything that we're doing, but that's the main part of our budget each year. All support for that comes from companies, horse organizations, foundation grants, and individuals. It goes into the AAP Foundation, which then serves as a tax-free donation. We provide monthly and annual reports. This year, we had the highest number of submissions or number of cases from 41 states and 6 provinces. We do get disease submissions from Canada. This year, the number was certainly up because of West Nile virus and vesicular stomatitis. But generally, we have a wide variety of these diseases, with most of them being the arboviruses, strangles, and herpes. We don't count vesicular stomatitis as number of cases. That's counted as number of premises. So when we put out our reports, we basically link to the USDA information for that week. We do not report pyroplasmosis cases. The reason being that USDA does not want to cause a kerfluffle with our trading partners. And so though that information is available from USDA, we don't post it as an alert. We've had 1.8 million visits to the website since we started, which was in May 2015, and a few more than 1 million to the alerts pages over that time. That has increased really mostly in the last 5 years. The subscribers that get emails, there's between 8,600 and 8,900. That varies with the disease. So if we have a herpes outbreak, we'll see more people signing up to get those emails, and then it slowly fades away. And we have about 18,000 Facebook followers. We're upgrading the website to be user-friendly. The main thing we'll be doing now is having a news page where we can put information for people to look for. The bulk of our 2023 work has been on the National Animal Disease Preparedness and Response Program, which is a grant we received, a cooperative agreement to fund a study on biosecurity. We wanted to find out the current knowledge and awareness of equine biosecurity in the industry, and specifically with horse owners. So we're trying to find out the gaps in biosecurity, what's needed to fill in, and what's the best way to deliver information to help do that. So we did 3 surveys: horse owner, an AAP member, and a state animal health official survey. The horse owner survey was created by the AAP Infectious Disease Committee. We wanted to find out the understanding of the horse owner as far as disease risks, and how we can deliver information, what resources they use, and specifically on vaccinations. It's a web-based survey. We tested it with about 10 owners, so to make sure it was understandable. We received 2,413 responses from 49 states. Responder location correlated with the number of estimated horses in each state. So we felt that we had a pretty good representation of the horse numbers by the respondents. We did learn that 45% owned horses 1 to 2. So basically 75% of owners have 5 or less horses, at least those that responded. We looked at the use of these horses, and following similar to the NOM study in 2015, the most was pleasure and trail riding. Note that it says select all that apply, so there could be multiple uses for some of these horses. But again, trail riding or pleasure riding, English Western, and then a sizable group of retired make up most uses of these horses. Where do the owners get their information or the resources about infectious disease? Good to hear that the veterinarians scored the highest by far. Owners are going to the veterinarian to get that information. They rely on other horse owners, EDCC, and social media, and then a number of other areas They were to select 3, so there is some duplication here, no doubt. I think this is important because it indicates an opportunity if we want to get information to the owner, that if we go through the veterinarian, they think that that's a good resource, and so we could hopefully increase education through veterinarians. Is there a plan to prevent infectious diseases at the facility where you keep your horse? 54% said yes, and basically 45% said no or didn't know. What about the perception of risk for horses going to events, shows, trail ride, other competitions? Basically, 65% don't perceive an increased risk. And so that was a question we had, and that gives us a pretty good answer, I think. I will say that in investigating this somewhat, we really don't know what the real risk is of a total population from some of these events. We know we get outbreaks, but if you take your horse to an event, do we have any idea what the real risk is or the risk factors? I think we still need to do some work in that area. The veterinary survey was created by the Infectious Disease Committee as well. We assessed them. We wanted to know how owners apply biosecurity in their perception, and then how veterinarians use biosecurity. So we sent out about 6,500 emails to AAP practicing members in the US. We got 408 responses. And those responses were from people that were similar to the AAP membership. So the number of years in practice or the type of practice mirrored what we have in the AAP as far as demographics. So we asked some questions. How do you feel most clients are prepared for dealing with an infectious disease? And again, about 60% were not prepared. And so that's what the veterinarians think about their owners. Indicate level of agreement with the following statement. A lack of client compliance affects my ability to implement biosecurity plans for facilities. Again, 70% agreed. So I think based on what the owners were telling us, that this potentially means that owners are not knowledgeable about the risk. And so they don't have a reason to comply. That's just my assessment. One of the most important risk factors, and I thought this was very interesting because at boarding, training, or event facilities, lack of isolation for new horse arrivals was what veterinarians thought was the main risk. And then lack of knowledge by horse owners. And I think that fulfills that question about where the gap is. But I thought this was very interesting. The veterinarians now think that this is a real problem. So our message is getting out. I think that having an isolation system for new horses is something that's important. You can see the other areas that are important. We mostly know about those. I'm not sure we know about the percentage that really the risk is, but this is at least somewhere to start. We also did a survey of animal health officials, state animal health officials. We assessed the challenges that state animal health officials face in managing biosecurity, outbreaks, and so on. We sent out 180 email addresses that we had and could find, got 72 responses from 45 states. Found that horse owners, so we asked, are there adequate personnel to manage infectious diseases and outbreaks by state veterinarians? And 50% said no, 50% said yes. Which of the following facilities require the most resources? So if you have an outbreak at a particular facility, what's the most resource guarded that needs to be done? So they found that horse shows, racetracks, and boarding facilities or stables. The survey, we had some information about the type of stable, but we didn't have enough to know how accurate this might be. So in other words, state animal health are finding at this, but we don't know what our facility record with the survey, if there's enough information to correlate with this, but we'll try to do that. how do the stakeholders prepare to receive biosecurity protocol information? And this is from state animal health officials. And as you can see, it's personal communication and site visits. That makes sense to me, is that personal communication, talking face to face, is very effective. I think that the stakeholders themselves felt that internet, the way we asked the question, felt that internet publications and videos were probably the most important way for them to receive biosecurity information, not necessarily about protocols. So, but I think there's evidence here that state animal health officials find it's preferable to do it and do this by personal communication or being actually at the site. I was curious to find out how state animal health officials used the EDCC. And in this study, we saw 79% use the disease alerts, 60% use the reporting form, 60% use the fact sheets. This is encouraging to me because it makes me think that this is useful information. I'm hoping to get more people to submit cases, including practicing veterinarians, and hopefully we'll do that over time. As a result of the owner survey, Angela and I put together and published the results of that owner survey. If you go to Google Scholar and put in the words biosecurity, surveys, infection, and horse, it'll bring up this PDF of this publication. So you can have it. We'll also put this on the EDCC news page. This includes the horse owner survey results and also does a statistical analysis to find the difference in biosecurity knowledge and awareness identified by horse use. We did look at the different regions of the country, but it really still came down to horse use was the most significant to tell the different segments of the industry and how they interpreted biosecurity. An example is this one, which we saw that whether there was a plan for preventing infectious diseases at the facility where you keep your horses, 54% yes. So those that said yes, 54%, lessons in the school facilities were significantly higher compared to the others. For those that said no, pleasure and trail riding had a significant difference and were higher than the other groups. And if those that didn't know, English show had a significant difference. So we found that for many different uses and many of the questions that we had, and that's all in the publication that you can review. So from this, we made some conclusions. That's based on what we have, and so there's probably more room for looking at this to decide. But increased use of temperature and monitoring. This was not considered to be very important by owners. And so to me, that's important. We know that that can be helpful. So that is an area that we potentially can increase education. Isolation for new horses at facilities, and we show evidence of both of that as far as an opinion about the gap here in knowledge. Understanding disease risk during horse mingling or contact. Again, the owners didn't seem to think this was very important, or they didn't recognize it. And so to me, this is something where we could put forth risk factors where owners might be more knowledgeable about that and therefore try and prevent some of it. Increased entry requirements such as vaccination and health certificates. This has been talked about in the industry. It's something I think is very important, and it came out in a survey that this is not done that often or potentially not felt as important. And then creating biosecurity plans for facilities and events. We've talked about this in the Infectious Disease Committee at AAP. There is a great deal of interest in having veterinarians be able to create facility plans when we did our survey of veterinarians, they did say that they don't do this either because they don't have time, they don't have the information they need, or the clients really just aren't interested. So there's a gap here, I think, that needs some education to try and bring that into people's awareness. So as I mentioned, how do we deliver the needed information? The owners wanted it by internet. They wanted it by horse publications, videos, and potentially presentations. That's the most important. We predict that we'll need to use social media. And at the AAP Infectious Disease Committee, we've talked about using infographics that is short, to the point, information put graphically to draw attention, to keep the attention span short, but still deliver the message. And so we'll be working on that this next year as a way to fulfill the gaps in this biosecurity. This was just an example that AAP has put out. So I had some reminders here at the end as far as participation in EDCC. We really ask that you submit as much information as possible. We realize that you don't always have all the information, that you're taking in a reportable disease. You've got whatever you've got is based on what the veterinarian is providing, but whatever is there, we'd like to have. We're asking that you use the submission form to do that. It's easy to use. It doesn't take that much more time than it does to write the email. We also will take in media releases. So if the state is producing a media release, if you send that to us right away, as long as it has all the needed information, we could post it. And then we will take submissions as an email sent directly to us and digest that information and put it on the website. We also ask that if you have a quarantine, particularly for herpes or some of these that are at major events, once the quarantine is over, please let us report that. Owners do ask the question, is this outbreak over? And if we can say it officially, we'd like to. Just a reminder that alerts are available on the phone app. You can find disease fact sheets and download them from either the website or from the phone app. They can be messaged from the phone app directly to your client. Links to the AAP disease guidelines are on the EDCC disease pages. We're trying to make that information available as a one-stop shopping. So you can get the owner fact sheet, you can get the AAP fact sheet, and there's other links that we decided may be very helpful about a disease or biosecurity information. We just put a Google map icon on the disease alert page. So down at the bottom, you'll see the Facebook page and you'll see the Google map icon. If you click on that and put it in the county and the state, which is on the alert, it'll take you to that and you can see a graphic about where that county is within the state or the United States. Well, that's a pretty fast run through, Katie, but I'd be happy to answer.
Right, I appreciate it. Again, if you have any questions, we may have a few minutes at the end to put it in the chat and we'll try to get those answered. If not, we'll send them on to Dr. White and we'll get those answers back to everyone. So at this time, we're going to transition to Dr. Angela Pelzel-McCluskey, who is going to give us an update on vesicular stomatitis. Take it away, Angela.
Thanks, Katie. So I just put in the chat, this is the link where you can get our VSV situation reports. They're posted weekly or more frequently as needed on the USDA APHIS website. There's an equine VSV page. If you're a cattle health person, they're also posted on the cattle health VSV page. But for this audience, I think that the equine page is probably the best resource for you. Back on January 3rd, so like a week ago, I posted a really happy sit rep, and it basically told you guys that all VSV quarantines in the United States had been released as of January 2nd. And the next step was supposed to be that we do a 30-day countdown where if we monitor, we test everything that comes in as a suspect. And if we get no new confirmed VSV cases in that 30-day time period after the last quarantine is released, then we get to declare the outbreak over. And it's a super happy event, and everybody who's been involved and has been doing this for months and months really loves that. So we got about a day and a half of the 30-day countdown before we had some new cases. So I'm just going to share my screen and show you guys the last sit rep that I put out, which was on Tuesday this week. I think a lot of you are following along and get to see these sit reps. But unfortunately, Sacramento County came back online. And we have 2 equine premises that are currently quarantined with new VSV cases, fresh VSV cases in Sacramento County. So this is the currently affected county in the United States, no others at this time. We had a total in this whole outbreak of 319 affected premises so far, and all but 3 of those were located in the state of California. So our cumulative map looks like this. We did have 1 premises affected in Nevada. We had 2 premises in 2 different counties affected in Texas. Just to give you, if you haven't followed along and you haven't heard me talk about these before, both the Nevada premises and this North Texas Shackelford County premises, those were all animals that never left the premises. So it looks like those were situations in which we had VSV infected animals move to the area that were never found or diagnosed or reported. And they infected the vector populations there in that area, which then caused the infections in our premises that were confirmed and reported. So only singleton premises in those 2 counties, and they went away. But that does show you sort of the impact of animal movement, especially in cases that are either not reported or are not being quarantined. Or, owners that maybe are not aware that they're moving infected horses. Sometimes that happens. I keep saying horses because not only you guys are interested in horses, but the majority of this outbreak, all but a handful of cases, have been in equine species being lesioned. We had a small number of cattle premises that went down. And then I think most of you guys know we did have 1 situation in which a safari park in Southern California had 26 rhinoceros infected. So that was exciting. We didn't know that VSV could go to rhinos, but rhinos are really similar paleontologically speaking to horses. So having an old world species contract a new world disease was a new one on us, but very, very interesting. And I dare say they were severely affected. The rhinos were sloughing feet, really bad oral and tongue lesions, and they really struggled to get through it. Kind of similar to, how bad some horses can get the disease. The South Texas incursion, that would be a normal movement upward from Mexico with the vectors moving. So that would be something that we typically see. The Southern California situation, though, when it first broke in May, was really surprising to us. So historically, Southern California has had a kind of a heat dome and a extreme drought protective area in Southern California that seems to have over time prevented incursions of VSV infected vectors upward from Mexico, or if it comes in, it never transmits, and we've never seen it. So historically, California is not supposed to be a VSV naturally infected state by incursion from the south. But this year was very different. I think you guys know that last winter and spring, Southern California specifically, was inundated with water, a situation that they're not at all used to. We had greenery everywhere, we had bugs everywhere, and we had cases occurring in the northern Mexican states last spring that then moved upwards into Southern California and then took off northward. So to kind of show you what happened over time, I usually put this epidemic curve in each of the sit reps. Starting from the May beginning of the outbreak, we had kind of a dual bump situation here where this was essentially Southern California, and each time it moved northward, we got another peak of cases that took off in that new affected area. And then Southern California kind of died off, which was nice. They also got hit, unfortunately, well, fortunately or unfortunately, with a hurricane. Hurricane Hillary impacted Southern California, another very rare event for them. And that really washed out all of the bugs, it seems like. After the hurricane came across, they had extreme flooding in Southern California. And that part of the outbreak stopped. But then we had continuation on more northern in the Central Valley. And that was this third peak that you see here. Where we're at now is these final little bumps at the end. This is the extreme northern edge of the outbreak zone that we had. So Sacramento County, Placer County. That's what we're kind of popcorning here in that Northern California area. We're really hopeful that a decrease in the fly populations with some more colder temperatures in that region might go ahead and get this shut down for us. Right now, we have no other suspects on test. We just have the 2 Sacramento County equine premises that are under quarantine. And their onset date was about the first couple of days of January. So they're due to come off about midweek next week. Their quarantine should be released. And right now we don't have anything else calling in and on test as of this moment. So hopefully I'll be able to put out another sit rep next week. And I hope that those premises will be able to be released with no new cases, but we'll just have to see how it goes. Again, when I do get all quarantines released, at that point, we're going to go into a 30-day countdown period again, where we're waiting to see if the outbreak is actually over. A lot of people have asked me, well, what's the forecast for this next year, 2024? And I would say we really don't know, because California was such a strange and unusual event for us. We don't know what the climate in the state of California, especially the different regions within California, what their capabilities are for sustaining an overwintering event and a new expansion year this year. But it's probably an elevated likelihood that California could have an expansion year starting this spring or early this summer. So yeah, we're just gonna have to see how it goes. Katie, that's my report. Again, I was super happy last week, and now I don't know.
Well, I really hope you didn't jinx yourself by saying there's nothing in the pipeline. So California, you better not be reporting anything to Angela today. Angela, while we have you on the phone, the line, we do have another question that I think is probably more appropriate for you to answer. And it's, I'm out of curiosity, I'm wondering why pyroplasmosis cases aren't reported to the EDC or reported by the EDCC.
Yeah, that was at our request, USDA's request. So Amanda, here's the situation. Pyroplasmosis is a foreign animal disease in the United States. If you go throwing alerts out to the industry, it causes extreme trade ramifications from all our other trade partners who are all of a sudden freaked out by why we didn't say something. We are doing a frequent and regular situation report for equine pyroplasmosis, which we share with all of our trade partners. And so when someone reports a singleton case of pyro out of context, it makes that case look somehow way more important than all of the other smaller cases that we've had going on. And it really causes a problem. OIE usually, WOA now usually sends us a note and says, what's happening? Well, you have our situation report. You have all of the cases that we've had. Also, I've been posting annually these cases to the USDA website, so it's available to you. Go onto the equine health webpage for USDA APHIS. There's an equine pyroplasmosis section. There are annual reports that tell you every single case we had every single year for the past 3 or 4 years. And it puts it in context, and it tells you what the actual risk factors were for those cases where the infection came from. We do not have natural tick-borne transmission on the US mainland. And it's really important that we maintain that level of knowledge about what is the situation with pyroplasmosis. This is not a naturally transmitted disease in the United States, except on the islands of Puerto Rico and US Virgin Islands, where we have it in those tick populations, and we manage the movement of horses before they come to the mainland. But the key point here is our problems with pyroplasmosis have 2 categories. iatrogenic transmission in quarter horse racehorses, specifically horses involved in bush track racing, where they're reusing needles, syringes, blood products, and other things. And the origin of those infections is actually horses from Mexico originally, where the disease is endemic. And then we also have cases in which horses are smuggled from Mexico or other Puro-infected countries, and we get them here as smuggled events. And so we don't have a natural tick-borne situation. Now, that could change. And it's really important that we find and manage every case of puroplasmosis to prevent us becoming an endemic country. That's what we're trying to prevent. So I know that was a very long-winded answer, but I wanted you guys to understand very clearly the information is available to you publicly on our USDA website for every single Puro case we have every year. And we don't want to do that alert process. And I really thank Nat White and the EDCC for understanding that situation and helping us to kind of prevent trade ramifications that are really unnecessary just because someone thought one case was suddenly so much more important than the other cases that we get. So I'll turn it back over to you, Katie.
Thanks, Angela. I know we're not going to get time to answer all these questions, so I'm going to summarize one of them and ask one more, and then we'll send them to the speakers to get answers back. Margot, these are for you. One of the comments is, I think there's a place for an abundant, for BLM and FS horses in long-term holding in the landscape to be included in the NOM study. So that's a comment for inclusion. And then there's a question regarding, was the concern regarding strangles related to geography or age?
And I have been trying to find that information. I'm sorry, I don't have it from the original study. I'll try to find that out though.
Okay. And there was another one that's coming your way as well that I've got. It's related to how the data or summary was, the method. I'm going to read this. The methodology for the NOMS needs. For example, if I ranked biosecurity number 1 and you ranked it number 5, what approach was used to weight to get to the list you provided? So maybe if you could get some information on that, and we'll put it back out to folks when we send the recording information with this call.
I mean, and the short answer is that they were ranked and given assigned numbers. So if it was the top 3 were assigned points. So if it was a number 1 thing, it was assigned 3 points. If it was number 2, it was assigned 2 points. If it was number 3, it was assigned 1 point.
All right, thank you. Just some last minute announcements here. I apologize, the recording started a little bit late. I was having some difficulty challenges. Hopefully we'll get those all sorted out in the coming months. The next call will be on February 8th at the same time, and we'll be using the same Zoom link information. So I will be sending that out. As I mentioned at the start of this call, we are hoping to post the recordings to the EDCC. Not sure if this one will get posted within the next couple of weeks, but that is the intent, and we are working on that. So I appreciate all of the speakers today, and I want to say thank you to all of them. And if we have any topic suggestions, please send them my way, or speaker suggestions. So thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thanks, Katie. Appreciate it.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.